Happy 2025, y'all. I can't believe it. And this year we are kicking off 2025 with a sourdough video with 100% freshly milled wheat. Yes, we're doing it. But a little bit with a tweak because it's kind of a review of sourdough recipes because I'm trying not one, but 4 sourdough recipes with 100% freshly milled wheat. And we're going to see how they turn out. Let's see if these are good recipes, if they turn out well, if I'm just horrible at what I do. Let's find out. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains, all from a biblical perspective. I teach you how to be milling your wheat, consuming whole grains, and why you should be doing it, and more. So I always get a million requests all the time about sourdough recipes with 100% freshly milled wheat, which I will say is difficult. And personally speaking, I am just really impatient when it comes to sourdough. I have a large family. I don't like how it takes me an entire day for like one loaf. So I just really haven't gotten down to doing it. But in this video, I'm going to be kind of answering y'all's request because I actually have 4 recipes that I'm going to be doing, and one of them actually is with, or 2 of them are actually with einkorn. Yeah. I jumped right in and doing 2 sourdough recipes with 100% freshly milled einkorn, and then 2 recipes with freshly milled hard white wheat. So we have the ancient wheat, and then we also have a more modern wheat. And we're going to be trying out these recipes. I'm going to be doing 2 recipes from this cookbook here. This is Carla Bartolucci's einkorn cookbook. She's the founder of Jovial Foods, and I'm going to be making her no-knead sourdough einkorn loaf, and then also her like French boule sourdough loaf. So I'm going to be doing those 2 recipes. And then the other 2 recipes I'm going to be using is both of these are no knead bread. So all of these are actually no knead, typical bowl shape loaves. So I try to stick with like the similar stuff. And then the other recipe I'm going to be using is one from Mary from the Rose Homestead, and then Cara from Grains in Small Places. So those 2 recipes were kind of shared with me to try. And so I figured these would be a good starting point to try out. And all of these recipes will be linked below, except this one. I'll just have to be linking the cookbook because I don't think I can just share the recipes from a cookbook. But these other recipes are at least online, and I can link those for y'all below. So I will be walking y'all through. This is kind of a vlog style as I make these, just to see how they turn out, what I'm doing, what my thoughts are. And at the end, we will do one big conclusion of what I think. So can I do it? I have been using freshly milled wheat for over a decade, but typically with commercial yeast. So I'm very familiar with baking bread, but I have not really dove in to sourdough. I have tried it in the past, always a complete failure. My chickens love it, us not so much. So we will see. Okay, so first off, we're going to be starting again with the einkorn. This is for the classic French boule in her cookbook. And what we actually start with is I first have to make a sourdough levain, and you'll kind of see this later with another recipe that I'll be doing. And basically this is just where you put a little bit of the sourdough starter and some flour. This is basically what it looks like. It's usually very thick, as you can see here. And then this has got to sit for anywhere from like 3 to 4 hours to overnight. So this is all for the French boule recipe here, and it's about at 200 milliliters, as you see here. We'll see what it looks like later. And now we're going to go ahead and get started on the actual no knead einkorn bread. And this is just where I go ahead and just add my regular sourdough starter, add in the flour and all the ingredients that it calls for, just kind of mixed together. So we have like a slightly fussy bread, and then a not as fussy bread recipe is the 2 differences between these 2 different einkorn recipes. And as a side note, I recently got this bowl from a flea market because I recently read that metal can actually possibly interfere with sourdough loaves. So I kind of wanted to switch it up a bit. But later you will see that I will use a metal bowl because it's what I have. And that's okay. Use what you have. But I will say I like this bowl. It's pretty cool. Okay, so there is my dough. It is actually very, very, very sticky. You can see how it's on my hands there, and it is definitely sticking to the bowl. That is definitely not a dough that I would be ready to roll out. But that's the beauty of this, is this is a no knead overnight. She says 10 to 15 hours. I'm starting this late at about 10:20 in the morning. Even though it's December, today is one of those very muggy, hot days in Florida. So it's a warmer day. We'll see if it actually rises a bit, but I'm going to cover this up with plastic wrap, put it on top of my stove with that levain, and we will see. So now we just cover it with plastic wrap, and really, like, that's all we do. There's no folding or anything. We just let it sit here and overnight, and basically just letting it double. And so now I'm just feeding my sourdough starter. So I've already used some, and now I'm basically just replenishing with however much I feel like replenishing, and just making sure that's go. And usually mine is just a 1-to-1 ratio. That's just how I like to do it, personally speaking, and it seems to work out just fine. So I think I added like a half a cup of the einkorn flour. I think that was here, and then half a cup of warm water, and that's basically the consistency I'm going for. Just like a good thick pancake batter type consistency. And just before I have one of those cool little covers, this is basically how I would always cover my sourdough starters. Coffee filter on a mason jar, and then a little mason jar rim lid, and bada bing, bada boom. You can use a rubber band, but y'all just keep it simple. And there you go. It's ready to go for the next time. And so now this is this is still for the no knead overnight artisan loaf with einkorn. It has pretty much risen all day. It's doubled in size, and now I'm just placing it in the Banneton basket here. I went ahead and just covered my Banneton basket, as you can see, and then heavily floured it. I will say this dough is still very, very sticky, but it's einkorn, and I'm kind of expecting that. But I'm just basically shaping it like the recipe called for, where you just kind of fold things in and kind of shape it like that, and then make it into a little ball, and then you place it in there with the seam side up. But you can see how I use this extra flour because it was still just so incredibly sticky to work with, and that's really what makes einkorn so tricky. And then from here we just cover it with plastic wrap, and it actually is going to rest for about 30 minutes. And while that's happening, I'm then going to be working on the classic French boule recipe. So here I'm just adding the salt. This is that levain that I did. You can see it rose from 200 milliliters to 300 milliliters, and that was sitting out for about 4 to 6 hours, I want to say. And so now I'm just following the rest of the recipe for the classic French boule with einkorn, where we're just adding all of these together. And it's funny because they state that you're mixing the ingredients with a stiff spatula until you have a wet, sticky dough. And let me tell you, y'all, when you work with einkorn, sticky does not even really cover it, because this dough is so sticky. But with this one, again, the classic French boule, you basically mix it, cover it with a bowl, 15 minutes, and then you're going to actually start doing a turn. It's not quite your typical turning method that you see with sourdough. She has actually her own technique of kind of folding it, but she did say to knead the dough about 2 minutes. But y'all, I mean, you can see I had the scraper here, and this stuff is just so crazy sticky to work with. As you can see, I mean, look at how sticky that is. It is sticking all over my hands. I kind of don't know, like, at what point should I add more flour to this, because I don't want to add so much that it is dense. But it's difficult to work with. I will say it is just so incredibly sticky. So I was just kind of going with instinct here, where I would just add flour and hoping I wasn't adding too much. But yeah, there you go. And it never really got smooth. So again, this may be me, but then I'm just putting it in here, and now we just let it rise. And then again, we'll be doing turning the dough. She does it in this kind of method, like kind of like an envelope type method. And I believe I did this for about 3 times. And now this is back to the regular boule recipe, not the French boule, but the no knead overnight. And you can see I'm trying to get it out, and it sticks. Oh, always so difficult for me to get out. But I've had a Dutch oven in the oven that's been heating up. We place it in here, and then we're going to bake this simple no knead bread. And here we are back to the French bowl. I'm telling you, y'all, I felt like a chicken with my head cut off, but we're just doing the folding method here. All right, this is the third and final turn, and then I'm actually putting this in the fridge overnight because it is now 8 o'clock at night. It is too late because this is supposed to basically proof for another 3 to 5 hours. So I'm assuming overnight in the fridge will be okay. And then tomorrow it will require another 60 to 90 minutes of rising time. So I'm not staying up that late tonight, but I will say this is a lot nice and soft, a very, very nice soft dough. All right, waiting for that other bread to get done, but we'll see you in the morning with this. Okay, so it's been 40 minutes. Now is the moment of truth to see how this bread did in the oven. Now I do have the option of taking the lid off and putting it back in for 5 more minutes, but let's see. Oh, y'all. Look at that. It actually rose a bit. Whoop, let me try to. Okay, let's see. You know, I think I am going to put this back in for 5 minutes just to see if I can get it a bit crunchier of a crust. So I'm going to leave the lid off 5 more minutes. But so far, I'm completely shocked that it actually rose the way it did. Okay, so it's been 5 minutes without the lid. So let's see what it looks like now. Ooh. Oh, y'all, like this is absolutely beautiful. And I am so surprised at how much it rose. So definitely want rubber gloves like this because I think I really need to, this parchment paper is tearing, so I need to get in there. Okay, so glad I got. That's loud. Okay, but y'all, look how beautiful that is. Not bad. Like this was better because whenever I put this in, I'm telling you, it just seemed like a dense thing that just wasn't going to rise. And I love how it broke so beautifully. That broke all on its own. So, but I have to say, I am pleasantly surprised. But the real test will be whenever I cut it open tomorrow, to see if it's actually dense. So let me get a cooling rack for this and I'll see y'all tomorrow morning. Okay, so here we are next day. It's actually around lunchtime because we've just gotten a little busy. And so this is again, the no knead loaf. And now it's time to slice it open. I will say like it feels heavy. I do suspect that this is going to be dense, but we will see. I'm hoping I'm pleasantly surprised, but I don't know. Okay, so let's try a slice. I have my Nakano bread knife. I do find that bread knives with more of the larger teeth tends to do better with more crusty breads like this. The crust isn't that crusty. Whoops. Okay, wow. All right, so first thing I'm surprised about are the open crumb, the very large holes. But I would say like it still feels a bit dense. Let's do another slice here. Okay, I gotta turn it this way. For how I have the camera, I'm right-handed on my cut, not left-handed. All right, so let's see how this one, yeah, and honestly, it almost doesn't even look like it was fully done on the inside. It looks it feels a little, doughy, I guess, lack of a better term. But I have to admit, I'm impressed with the holes. But I would say even with that, it feels dense. All right, so I'm just preparing lunch right now and I'm going to go ahead and try one of the pieces here. I don't need all of that. And of course, some butter. Now it's not hot, but let's see how it is here. Okay. Okay, I will say the flavor is very good. Typical sourdough type bread. But it is good. I would say it definitely is more on the dense side, which is, again, surprising with having such open holes that it still kind of be a bit dense. So it is a bit more chewy whenever I eat it, but taste-wise is good. Okay, so it is now almost noon on Friday. I started this process Wednesday about 10 a.m. and yesterday was Thursday and we had some things come up and I was just unable to do anything with the sourdough. So the actual French bowl that she has, I've actually kept in the fridge this entire time, and here it is. So I don't think it's really risen much. I didn't expect it to. So, but it's just been sitting in the fridge. I've seen sourdough recipes where you can leave it in the fridge for 24, 48 hours. Mine has kind of been pushing it. I was intending to do it yesterday, but again, things came up that definitely took more priority. So at this point, if I was following the recipe, it would be time to shape it and put it in a Banneton type basket to begin with. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. And I'm just gonna let it rise until it's pretty much double in size. I'm hoping that it's still gonna rise with it kind of being a bit older. So let's see, wow, that is a very, very, very cold, very cold piece of dough right there. Oh, it definitely smells sour. And you know what? So it dawned on me, this is too cold for me to shape. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of fold it a little bit, kind of redo that kind of fold here. And then I am not going to shape it right now. I'm going to allow it to soften a bit, get more to a room temperature. Maybe it'll rise a little bit there. So I'm just going to leave it at room temperature. So today, Florida has decided to be kind of winter again. It is now cold. 2 days ago, it was crazy muggy and hot. Like the house got up to about 78, 79 degrees. Now it's like 70 degrees in the house. We haven't been doing AC or our heater. So we'll see how this works today. That's how Florida is in the winter. It doesn't know what it wants to be. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of watch this, keep an eye on it. It is 11:35 a.m. and we will see how long it takes to do this. All right. So you know how I've been a little frustrated working with sourdough and einkorn, but there's one thing that I have not ever been frustrated with, and that is with my wheat from 4 Generations Organic Farms, who is the sponsor of today's video. So I love 4 Generations Organic Farms because not only are they organic farmers, but they're also regenerative farmers that really like to take care of the soil to make sure that the product that they are growing is the best that it can be. So 4 Generations does not do einkorn, but they do hard red wheats, hard white wheats, and wheat durum, and others that come out periodically. And I absolutely love them that I can actually buy directly from the farmer. They've been around for, you guessed it, 4 generations since the late 1800s, and they truly care about you as a customer. Their wheat berries are very clean, and as far as they have my favorite hard red, which is Butler's Gold, and my current favorite hard white, which is Stardust. And both of those are extremely reliable wheats that are excellent for beginners. So if einkorn kind of intimidates you, or it's just way too expensive, then definitely want to check out 4 Generations Organic Farms. All you have to do is just go to grainsandgrit.com/4generations. There's a 10% off coupon code for those of you who are ordering for the first time. Tell them I sent you. And thanks so much to 4 Generations for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so if you've lost track, this is now the classic French bowl recipe. It is now warmed up where I can actually shape it enough. This is just room temperature. And then putting it into one of my silicone Banneton baskets here, and fingers crossed covering that and letting it rise. And so now this is about 9:40 at night. And I get to flip it, and thankfully this came out and didn't really stick. But then we just bake this once again, like the no knead, in a preheated oven, and then fingers crossed. But honestly, when it came out, I was just I kind of felt defeated at this point, because I could tell when I pulled it out that once again I had just created one of those kind of flat loaves, and it was already super late at night. It had already been a crazy long day, and as you can see, it just didn't really rise. And I have to say, at this point, I was pretty defeated. Okay, so the einkorn didn't work out so great, and I probably should have started that one last after these, because these are now 2 recipes we're going to try with just regular, pretty much, I think I'm going to use hard white wheat that I'm going to be using today. So But the two recipes that I'm using is the, let's see, Cara Grains in Small Places. This is the recipe that a friend of mine, whenever I saw her loaf of bread, she said this is one that she used and she recommended it to me. And then the other one I've seen kind of floating around, this is from the Rose Homestead. So both of them are bowl type loaves. So which I've never really had great success with in the past. Let's try these out to see. So I'm actually going to start with Cara's recipe first, because also a difference is Cara's recipe I should be able to do to completely finish today, where Mary's recipe, the Rose Homestead, she has it where it's fermenting overnight. So I'm actually going to start with Cara's recipe first. This is about 10 o'clock in the morning. Yet again, I probably could start this earlier, but and if I wasn't filming in a regular day, I probably would start it first thing. So I'm going to start with this recipe first, and then we'll move on to Mary's recipe, the Rose Homestead. So I'm going to have them both going at once, ideally one recipe at a time, but I'm going to be marking them, have different timers. So I will say, first off is last night, Cara's recipe does have you where you make a levain, which is, or a levain, whatever you want to call it. But that's where you start with some of your sourdough starter, some flour and water the night before. And usually these, I've noticed, are thicker than what I typically do than just a regular sourdough starter. And this is what it looks like this morning, which is, it is beautiful. It is bubbly. It has doubled. I didn't show you last night, but last night it was about here. And right now it's up to here. So this is perfect. And I will say it is thicker. Usually my sourdough starter is about the consistency of pancake dough. And you can see like that's not moving. It is thicker. All right, so look at me, y'all, actually weighing my ingredients. Yes, sir, Bob. I just wanted to be really precise and try to follow these recipes the way that they called it for, as much as that like hurts me a little inside to follow a recipe exactly. But I did it because I wanted to actually review these recipes. And so here I'm just adding in, again, this is Cara's recipe, Grains in Small Places, and where we're just adding in that levain and the other ingredients that she calls for, the flour. But again, we are not adding the salt yet, which I found very interesting. We will be adding that later, but I'm just measuring everything out and putting in a bowl, and we stiffen it up, and then we basically just let it sit there and then do shape and folds. Right now, it feels good. Obviously has not been kneaded yet, but it's not super sticky. Obviously it's going to break apart because we have to let all that rest and everything. I do find it interesting that she adds the salt actually at a separate time after this process. So we will see. I think this is the first recipe I've tried that actually does that. Okay, so let me get some, I'm gonna go ahead and get plastic wrap and cover this. All right, so while that is doing that thing, I'm gonna go over to Mary's recipe because she does it a little bit differently. So she has it first thing in the morning. You mix all the ingredients in a large mixing bowl until the dough comes together and is a smooth ball of dough. Now she does not weigh her ingredients. So I'm going to be doing a metal bowl. I know it might make people freak out, but it's what I've got. Use what you have. So this is my starter that I fed yesterday. Same flour as with the levain that I did, but it's nice and bubbly. It was at 200 milliliters last night. It is pretty much doubled. It's only just started to go down just a little bit, but that is a beautiful, happy starter there. Okay, so again, now we're at Mary's recipe, the Rose Homestead, and all that she has to do is basically you put all the ingredients in at once, mix them all together, and then similar to Cara's recipe, Grains in Small Places, similar to her recipe, you just have to let it sit for a little bit, and then we also start going into stretch and folds with both of these recipes. But that's probably fine. So what I have done is I've done it where it is a ball of dough. It is slightly sticky, tacky. All right, so now I'm just covering up this bowl. That's going to now be sitting, and now I have to keep track of whose recipe is who. But this is now Kara's recipe because it's been about 30 minutes, and now it's time to add in the salt and a little bit of water. So she has you weigh out the salt and water, mix that all together, and then we're just adding it into the dough and then doing stretch and folds and mixing that into the dough. So I will say it's a bit wetter, but it looks very nice. Okay, so we're gonna do that, cover it, and then now we need to do a stretch and fold for Mary's recipe. Okay, so here we have back to Mary's recipe, and we're just doing these stretch and folds as the recipe states. Now, what I was doing to keep track of these stretch and folds is I was actually on the recipe putting tally marks of how many times I was stretching and folding these recipes. And I did get them where I could basically do them at the same time. That's just how it worked out with these two recipes. So these were roughly, I was stretching and folding roughly anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, just kind of whenever I got to it, I was timing it. But that's basically what I'm doing. And it did vary on how many of these stretch and folds I did based on the recipe, which you'll find out in a bit. Okay, so I've done a stretch and fold of Kara's recipe for 3 times. So here's where I think it's kind of the hardest part, because she does state that it takes 46 hours. I started this at noon. It is now about 3:20. And she says that you're wanting it to rise about 20 to 30%. And it is starting, I'm starting to see little bubbles here. Let me see, but she says the phase should take about 4 to 6 hours. Oh, and this is the problem where I'm just kind of wondering if it's time to shape it. I am going to go a little bit longer just to be on the safe side. So this is kind of a little wobbly, but I do like how I'm seeing the bubbles. It is rising. It is very stretchy and very soft, more moist than the other bread. So I'm just kind of doing another stretch and fold here. And this may be the last one, and then I might go into the shaping. Yeah, because it is starting to get bigger. So that's Kara's recipe, and let me mark that I did this for a 4th time. That was more of about an hour because I was a little busy before reshaping, or sorry, doing the stretch and fold. So I'm just, with these, you know, I get busy and I'm just going anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. Okay, but you know, what I'm gonna do with this one is to kind of gauge on how much it is rising. I'm actually gonna put it into one of these containers here. I forgot what they are called, but I'm gonna put it in there. I am gonna oil it down just a little bit. This here has the measurements on the side, so I can kind of see how much it is rising. So I'm gonna kind of carefully take this out here. Okay, and then I'm just gonna kind of plop it in there. Okay, and kind of maybe do a little stretch and fold there. Okay, so for me, it's about at that, and it has a lid, handy dandy. Okay, so there we can see this about at that, pretty much at that 1 liter mark, give or take, because it's kind of a domed shape, but that at least gives me an idea. Okay, now Mary's recipe, I've already done 4 stretch and folds. This will be my last stretch and fold for Mary's recipe. And again, I can tell a difference. Like this one does feel basically like a heavier dough, but it still feels okay. I'm just still like, it's still kind of soft, slightly tacky, which I know generally is what we're wanting, but not as soft as Kara's recipe. Okay, and then I did the stretch and fold with hers, and I'm going to kind of shape it into a dough ball and place that in. Okay, and to be extra safe, so I'm gonna write which one this is. Okay, so this is, okay, Mary's recipe, and I'm writing the time. It is about 3:25. Write the time on the top, and then I'm going to mark it here of roughly where this is, where I can kind of give that marking. And the great thing about wet erase is that it's not gonna really rub off. You actually have to apply water. So I just put, you know, what the time it was, what time I put this in, And I'm gonna do the same thing with Car's recipe as well, just in case my kids get a hold of these and start moving them around. I can know which one is which. Okay, and this one's on the, definitely on the 1 quart, but we're gonna mark it anyway. So you can see there, and then I wrote that down on the top. So fingers crossed so far, I'm feeling good. I am feeling a little, I'm gonna move this camera, this is ridiculous. All right, better, so I'm not all like, So here are my thoughts so far, especially comparing it to the einkorn recipes that I've already done at this point in the game. And also comparing them to yeast bread loaves that I've done. At this point in the game, both of these doughs are feeling good. Car's is feeling a bit lighter, softer than Mary's, but Mary's is still feeling like it's still kind of soft, but I can tell it's just a bit heavier or denser type of, like that's what it feels like right now as a loaf. So if I was to say right now which one's gonna turn out better as of right now, okay, there's still a long time to go. But as of right now, I'm feeling really good about Car's recipe. But Mary's goes overnight in the fridge. So that's still a lot longer time for it to be relaxing that gluten and everything like that. So, but I am, so far, I have hopes. Okay, I have hopes. I have tried other recipes before where at this point, I generally knew, I don't think this is going to be good. But what I usually mess up on, where it usually goes bad, is whenever it is shaped, and then when I go to bake it, it either falls flat or it's still just dense at that stage. So we will see, but that's my thoughts right now. All right, so it has been 30 minutes since we put Car's recipe in here. And it has like expanded a little bit, but look at all, I love this too, because you can see like the nice bubbles, all those beautiful bubbles there, which is great. So what I did is during this, I was really looking over the recipe, and this is now where we do bench rest, where we shape it into the bowl shape, and then we let it rest for 10 to 20 minutes. And then we actually repeat that 1 to 2 more times. And then in the meantime of all of this, we need to preheat the oven to 480 degrees Fahrenheit with a Dutch oven in it. Okay, so I'm pulling this out and I'm shaping it into the loaf. There does not have a Banneton basket with this one, but I'm really trying to work on that surface tension. And then I just repeated this, I want to say like 3.5 times. About every 15 minutes, I would go in, as you see, and just reshape it because it wants to flatten out, and just reshaping it. And each time it did kind of hold its shape a little bit better, but I was still a little concerned because it seemed to still want to flatten out. So this last time I was ready to bake, and so I just scored it right there and put it right into that Dutch oven and followed the instructions of how to do it. This is Car's recipe, by the way, if I didn't make that clear. And here it is after it's done baking, and I will say this is the first time I've actually been a little bit happy with my loaf. Okay, so I'm about to do something that normally I do not do. I've allowed this bread to cool down for 30 minutes, and usually I want to wait until the loaf is completely cooled down before slicing, but my family is about to have a mutiny on me if I do not serve them this fresh bread out of the oven. So I'm gonna go ahead and slice this. This has only been resting for about 30 minutes. So the crust feels pretty good. And now we're gonna slice it to see what it looks like on the inside. Okay. So that's that part right there. And then here is the inside of the bread. So still looking slightly dense, but not too bad. Again, it would probably do better if I let it completely cool down, but I do like the crust. I will say that. So I think those temperatures are perfect in the way that I did it. I did do it 480 for 30 minutes and then with the lid on, and then I turned it down to 450 as the recipe says, and then baked it for another 20 minutes without the lid. And that seemed to work very well with my crust. So there is that piece. It's sliced pretty well. Let's put some butter on it. So now let us taste it. All right, I will say, not bad. That's a good sourdough bread. I think it's a little doughy, slightly. But again, this is a hot bread. You're supposed to let it cool down. So let me go take it to one of my taste testers. Okay, so husband says it tastes good as well. So again, this is Car's recipe. Good job. I would say it's a good recipe. Now, I did tweak a few things along the way from other things I learned, but overall, I did pretty much follow the recipe. Yeah, so that one works. And now we got to work on Mary's bread. Get that ready for the fridge. Okay, so heavily flour the banana basket and fingers crossed that it doesn't stick. Her dough, definitely, you can see here it has risen. It's nice and bubbly. All right, so here I am just shaping the loaf. Same type of shaping as pretty much all of the other bowl ones have been. And then I floured the top, put it in, covered it with plastic wrap. And then also the little cover that I have, I kind of want it tightly. And then it was in the fridge. And then here I am the next morning. It was overnight. And then I did have some difficulty getting it out, but it didn't stick. Yay. And so I just score the bread. There's no resting. And then you just go ahead and bake it. Preheated oven, the Dutch oven was in there. And I went ahead and baked it, followed the instructions. And here is Mary's recipe, the results after baking. And I will say, I was pleased. It did not have as much of an oven spring rising in the oven as Car's recipe, but not bad. All right, so this is completely cooled down. This is Mary's loaf here. So let's now check it out on the inside now that it's a completely cooled down loaf. All right, so again, this is kind of awkward because I'm right-handed. All right, there's one. Then let's get a little slice. Okay, so that's what it is on the inside. I will say not bad, kind of a smaller crumb, but we do have a crumb there. It does feel, you know, I would say this is kind of close to the sourdough loaves that I've put out before, where it's just a little bit, you know, it's just a little bit dense, but kind of, let me try it here. No butter. Yeah, that is a good loaf. So it tastes good. And I will say the inside, like it's not crazy, you know, it's not crazy dense or anything. But I think Car's loaf rose just a little bit more. You saw that the crumb was at least, there were parts of it that were a little bit bigger. It was a slightly bit taller of a loaf. And I scored it better as well. But this one I would say not bad, especially since this one was like the easier, just kind of dump it all in. She says like you can keep this in the fridge for even 2 to 3 days before baking it. So it can maybe kind of go better with your schedule. But I would say not bad. But kind of like it tastes, it is a delicious bread, a very good, it tastes good, but yeah, there you go. Okay, so I actually forgot to do this earlier, but I actually just had my husband try some of Mary's bread recipe, and he kind of agreed with me where it's not as fluffy as Car's recipe, but it is a bit more of that traditional sourdough type flavor with Mary's. And I think because of the longer ferment, it was a bit more of a sour, that a bit stronger of a flavor in a good way. Like I don't say strong isn't bad. So it really, again, that's kind of one of those things with sourdough is the longer you have it ferment, the more soured it's going to be. And that definitely affects the flavor. So I found that interesting that he kind of, he reached that conclusion with me. All right, so I did it, all 4 loaves. So let's recap of kind of what happened with these loaves. So the no knead einkorn loaf was good. I actually think between the 2 einkorn loaves, that one may have done a little bit better than the French style bowl loaf. And I think that's mainly because, as you saw, I think I filmed it, but whenever I put it in the Banneton basket, it just kind of stuck a little bit. And when getting it out, I think it just caused the loaf to squish down a bit. So it's possible the French einkorn loaf may have been a little bit taller. I don't know. But both of those were kind of my shortest loaves. They did not rise as well as the hard white wheat loaves, the 2 recipes I did for that. But I will say this for einkorn. I am still going to work with it because it is a delicious flavor. And I've always noticed that even with like commercial yeast loaves, even when I'm not trying, einkorn tends to want to have a bit, like you're gonna see that crumb, those holes in the bread. Now, not massive ones, but it's always giving me that. So I do want to experiment more with einkorn, both with commercial yeast and especially with sourdough, to see if I can get a better crumb, if I can get those taller loaves. So still need some experimentation with that. And also, like, einkorn is super expensive, and you may not want to go through the experimentation with that. Now, again, those loaves were very, very good. Both of those einkorn loaves, my kids loved, but it was a little bit dense for my husband. It was a great flavor, but not his favorite, and still a little bit dense. And my family is used to like perfect type bread. So just keep that in mind. So when my husband rejects something because it's too dense, it's because he knows he can have something better. That's all. But the flavor was good. So that's my conclusions with the einkorn loaves. Is good, but needs some more work, but it's just a tricky ancient grain to work with. Now, as far as Car's recipe and Mary's recipe, again, they'll be linked below. I think they were easier because they were with a hard white wheat, not a ancient grain. So if you're going to start with one of these and you're a newbie, I would suggest the hard white ones, because again, it's also cheaper of a grain. Einkorn is really expensive. So if something goes wrong, you know, you don't feel like you've wasted a lot of money. But I think, again, they were kind of different between Cara and Mary's recipe. They were slightly different in their own ways. And so that did result in different results. So Cara's recipe, I did really like the crust out of all of them. I think the crust was the best. I also noticed that hers just rose better. The dough was a bit different. So it's definitely one that I'm going to take and kind of work with it more. See what possibly I can tweak, because there were some things that I was kind of noticing I was already, like, I wanted to tweak as I went, but for this video, I wanted to stick with what the recipe said. So I will be taking that and kind of experimenting with my own. But the crust was the best one out of all of them. And then Mary's recipe was also good because it was just kind of a dump and like throw everything into the bowl. I didn't have to worry about weighing it. So I guess it was less of a fussy recipe. I didn't have to make sure that the night before I made a levain. I just used the starter that I already had and fed as normal from the day before. So, you know, they have their pros and cons, but with that, you notice that you get different results with sourdough, with fresh and milled wheat. Now, one thing I want to work on is, and this comes with practice on my end, is figuring out how to adjust, especially the amount of flour that you may need as we go. If you've seen my simple yeast bread loaf recipe, I state and I show you guys how to know when you need to add more or less flour to a commercial yeast loaf recipe. And I kind of want to figure that out with sourdough. Also want to figure out a good timing before I come up with a recipe of my own. So a lot more experimentation on my end, but this gives me hope. I will say there is hope. Like it looks like it can be done, but just need to work with it just a little bit more. But so hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts below. Let me know if you have any tips for me with sourdough, all the things. I want to hear them down below. And also, if you're just wanting to know how to make a simple yeast bread loaf recipe with commercial yeast with 100% fresh milled wheat, this is great for, especially if you're a newbie and you just need to get something going, then be sure to check out this video here. And as always, I hope you'll have a wonderful day. Happy New Year, and I'll see you next week. Bye.